Okay, great. And I will move to speaker view. Sorry, just a second. Speaker view. And Paul and Alan, you should be recording. Okay, and I would like to request everyone who is not speaking to mute themselves. And secondly, we do have interpretation, simultaneous interpretation. So please, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will find a globe-like icon, which is an interpretation icon. Please choose the language you want, either English or Russian. And just in the first minute or so, if you are not hearing the language you need to hear, please put something in the chat. I will be monitoring it and we will make sure it's working. We tried it out earlier and it was working. Okay, Mary, I think we can start.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Well, first of all, welcome. My name's Mary Davis. I'm Secretary of Marx Memorial Library and Workers' School. And I want to welcome you on behalf of Marx Memorial Library. We are actually not the host anymore. We were going to be. This was going to be a hybrid meeting, but great thanks to Professor Radhika Desai at the University of Manitoba, because they are doing all the technical aspects for this I think, going to be very, very interesting meeting. And that, as Radhika's just said, it is going to be simultaneously translated into Russian. So Marx Memorial Library, let me just say a word about it first. It was founded in 1933 with the aim of advancing education, knowledge and learning in all aspects of the science of Marxism, the history of socialism and the working class movement. It's been at the heart of the British Labour movement for 90 years, and the library is home to a unique collection of published and archival sources related to subjects including trade unionism, peace and solidarity movements, and the Spanish Civil War. Well, I'm very pleased that we are kind of semi-hosting this meeting tonight, because it's a very important meeting on 21st century capital, critical post-Soviet Marxist reflections, based on a book published by Manchester University Press. And how would Marx have understood 21st century capitalism? That's the subject that our speakers, the authors of this book, are going to talk about tonight. So I want to welcome. I'm very pleased that you're here. I'm very pleased also that this is going to be recorded and that it's being watched, I think, in Canada, Britain, and in Russia. So Alexander, I hope I'm going to pronounce your name correctly, but I probably won't. So you're going to just correct me at some point. Alexander Buzgalin is a professor in the Department of Political Economy and director of the Center for Modern Marxist Studies at Lomonosov Moscow State University. Andrei Kolganov is a professor at the same university and the principal researcher at the Russian Academy of Sciences. Now, this book, which unfortunately I haven't read yet, but I hope to straight after this meeting, has received amazingly favourable reviews, including from James K. Galbraith, who says it's a remarkable text, which will bring the Western reader into contact with the rich and ongoing currents of Russian critical Marxism. Praise indeed. And there's been other very, very tremendous reviews. That this ambitious book presents a comprehensive analysis and critique of the current stage of market-driven capitalism, drawing on Soviet and post-Soviet schools of critical Marxism that are little known in the West. I think it's going to be fantastically interesting for us. So I'm going to ask the two authors to speak first, starting with Alexander. And then there will be three discussants who are all here: Professor David Lane, Professor David Kotz, and Professor who just met, Radhika Desai. So over to Alexander first, then, to introduce this very important book. Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and pleasure for us to be in a such meeting. It's fantastic in very difficult situation, very deep international conflicts. We have discussion about Russian academic book with many foreign guests, with up to 50 people in only Zoom, and there are some people who are watching in other channels. Memorial library, Marx Memorial Library for us is like a church. We don't believe in God, we don't believe in Marx as God, but this is an extremely important place of academic left thought, academic life. Also, I want to say a few words in the frameworks of these 15 minutes. This book had a long history. In 2004 was published first edition of book Global Capital, which we wrote with Andrei Kolganov. It was one volume book, then it was two volume books in 2014, and this two volumes edition in Russia has 5 editions already now, so it became popular with big debates. We had the big honor to present our main ideas in the University of David Kotz, University of Massachusetts, in Amherst, in Cambridge, in many other places. And unfortunately, we have very short time to present main ideas. But even in these short frameworks, I want to say that this book was born because of Radhika Desai, and she is sister, mother, daughter of us, because her edition was extremely important for us. We could not write normally for Western audience, and she made a lot of critical, essential remarks, additional remarks as far as form of text is concerned, and so on. So moving to the main ideas of the book, I will try to use screen in order to make this event really working. And I want to stress that this book was written and presented in frameworks of the Center of Modern Marxist Studies, its Department of Philosophy, Moscow State University. And we are working inside the school, which is devoted to the legacy of culture and historical decisions of Moscow State University. The whole school stream, and our center is working inside this stream. You have in the presentation full name of this school. It's very complex, so I will not read it. And together with Moscow State University, we were born as people, as authors, and we are developing and working as teachers, as professors. But first of all, I want to stress that object of our research is late capitalism. Ernest Mandel, who will have 100 anniversary this year, by the way, Frederick Jameson, many other authors wrote about late capitalism. What we made specific definition. Late capitalism as epoch when capitalist market relations cannot develop without addition of socialist forms. I will tell here honestly. It is a paradox, it is dialectical contradiction. In order to be strong, capitalism must use non-capitalist forms, post-capitalist forms. And epoch when it is impossible to survive and develop for capitalism without these post-capitalist relations, without negation of yourself inside yourself, for us is late capitalism. And we are analyzing this event. And we use this caricature for explanation. Without safe support of proletariat struggle, capitalism cannot survive, because without the struggle will be no free of charge education, some forms of regulation, social sector, and so on. It's paradox, but important. In this situation, all categories which Marx analyzed in Das Kapital has transformation. The essence is in main aspects the same, but there are a lot of transformations of the main categories. And among them, market. It's no more market of automized producers, it's market of networks of huge corporations who has power to manipulate to control, to regulate some fragments of market. And this is a competition of manipulators. This is market where power of manipulators is more important than power of competition. And this market is also totalitarian because it is not only market of commodities in the sphere of production or of normal goods, let's say economy itself. It's market in the sphere of culture, education, science, healthcare, family relations, interpersonal relations, everywhere. All life became market. It's totalitarian market. And this domination has many illustrations, and there are a lot of them in book of David Kotz and other books. We used only a small picture today, but in our text also we will find a lot of some illustrations. What is also important, we have now production of a new type of commodity. It's a commodity simulacra, sign of commodity. It was written many decades ago that we have political economy of sign by different authors, including postmodernist French authors. But it is political economy phenomenon, because now we have not think, we have sign of think, and we are selling and buying sign. And because of that, we had the new content of value. This value is expenditures not of abstract labor for creation of commodity, but abstract labor which is used for creating of simulacra of sign. It is spending of time and efforts and costs in marketing sphere, in sphere of public relations, not in the sphere of production. Use value, it is artificially created use value. It is not something natural for personality. It's not food, it's not dress, it's not car. It is something artificially created. And main problem of modern market is to create artificial need for useless science. This is modern market. And we have this economy of simulacra, and forms of this economy is well known. It is fake economy, fan economy. There are a lot of other forms. I don't have time to comment more. Now, Andrei Kolganov will continue with characteristic of money, which also has qualitatively new content. It is product of fictitious virtual financial capital. And this part was written mainly by Andrei, and he will comment this.
First of all, a lot of thanks for Radhika Desai, because without improvements which made with her help, your assistance, the understanding of this problem will be not so clear, which is make now. So now the neoliberalist ideology transformed the concept of monetarism into fetish. And this fetishization of money and fetishization of financial sphere has a real fundament. Why? Let's look on historical development of money. First of all, money in the end of 19th century started to serve the circulation not only commodities, but in substantial scale, the circulation of fictitious capital. In the beginning of 12th century, fictitious capital became the dominant form of financial capital. In the last third of 20th century, the turnover of fictitious financial capital exceeded the turnover of goods and services tenfold. Alexander, как я могу...
I moved to
next. Okay. So money in the 21st century is no longer so much a commodity, universal equivalent, according to the Marx theory, as a product of virtual, fictitious financial capital. Now, it is not the commodity world excludes from its environment a special commodity that can be exchanged for all other goods. Now, the process of circulation of virtual, fictitious financial capital forms money as a universal equivalent for the exchange of virtual, fictitious values. Next. To understand this transformation of the nature of money, it is necessary to understand the nature of virtual, fictitious financial capital. Virtual, fictitious financial capital is fictitious capital whose market estimation is decisively skewed as a result of manipulation by the largest capitals and by most powerful states, and so deviates substantially both from the value of real assets and from capitalization of the stream of expected income. This manipulation is possible because high concentrated financial resources enable to influence on the fluctuation of financial market prices. Information technologies, virtual processes, which increasingly dominate financial markets, make it easier for states and corporations to control market estimations. Next. Alexander. This transformation of money has visible consequences. Among them, one can point out the paradoxical effect of the increase in money supply in circulation on the level of commodity prices. A significant increase in the money supply may not lead to an increase in inflation, but sometimes led to its decrease. This paradox is explained by the fact that the increase in money supply is almost completely absorbed by the financial market. As a result, an increase in the prices of financial assets is ensured without a significant impact on inflation in the consumer market. As a conclusion, this virtual fictitious financial capital is not simply intertwined with the capital of the real sector, according to the concepts of Hilferding and Lenin, but exercises hegemony over it. The result is financialization, leading to crisis of over-accumulation of capital. Alexander, next.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrei. You made more substantial than I expected a presentation of this part, but I will continue that we have changes in the nature of commodity, changes in the nature of market, and of course, change in the nature of capital. And we have a new system of exploitation. It is system of appropriation of rent, not only surplus value. It is system of exploitation of creative workers, creative potential, and exploitation of creative workers is exploitation of the culture of humanity, because every creative worker use all cultural potential, cultural wealth of the mankind, even in our conference, for example. And this is also a system of exploitation which includes different elements of this exploitation, starting from semi-slave labor, which is still the reality, and not only in these poor countries, but even in Russia in some aspects, including normal, let's say, traditional Das Kapital explained exploitation of industrial wage labor, including financial capital as exploiter of all other spheres of economic and social life, including exploitation of culture and nature through exploitation of creativity. And this is complex system of exploitation, not only extraction of the surplus value. And because of that, we have new forms of reproduction and division of production, social production, which made Marx, we think is not enough now. We have huge, it is gray in the scheme, huge useless sector. It was described as junk economy also. Sector which produce simulacra, which produce useless things, useless, but for human development, useless for development of technologies, useless for social progress, but very useful for making money. And we have also changes in the law of reproduction, law of accumulation of capital in the period of sunset of capitalism. Marx wrote that the accumulation of capital led to the decline of living standards, quality of life of working people, and this is true. But 20th century and the beginning of 21st century, by the way, including strike now in Britain, showed that there is opposing factor, very important, social creativity of the working people. And there is law. The more strong we have social creativity opposing capital, the better are living conditions, even in the situation of accumulation of capital. The less we have social activity, we have attack of capital, and accumulation of capital lead to the decline of living standards. And this is very simple to show even with statistic, and David Kotz, I think, can do this. Plus, we have to use, of course, a theory of accumulation through dispossession, which we have a lot of examples of such accumulation, especially in our country. So finally, we have one-sided, very narrow development of technologies, primarily in informational sphere, which is very useful for financial capital, very useful for fictitious, useless sector, and partly useful for progress of technologies, but we don't have enough progress in the sphere of healthcare, environment, real automatization of production, material production, and so on. We have growth of social inequality. We have enormous problems and conflicts in geopolitical economic sphere, which is described by Radhika Desai. And we have growth of alternatives because of that. And by the way, in Russia, we have now up to 100 Marxist circles created from the below in very complex situation of modern Russia. So we cannot show all picture how we conclude, how we came to these conclusions in the book, but I wanted to stress this. To finalize, modern system of production relations of late capitalism is, let's say, has genetic unity with relations described in Das Kapital by Marx. Like, I don't know, it's the difference between Buzgalin when he was 20 years old and Buzgalin, which is now 60 years old. So now we have capitalism, which is old, late, but it is the same capitalism with big transformations. Market became totalitarian. Money became product of virtual fictitious financial capital. Exploitation of through expropriation of surplus value became system of exploitation of the culture, nature, creativity, and so on. We have new forms of accumulation of capital and new forms of crisis of this capital. And what will be the future? Postscriptum in our book, in our writings, is hope for the, as minimum, very deep social, ecological, humanitarian reforms, as maximum qualitative transformation to new society. And I can be honest, I will say that this is socialist or even communist society, which must be and will be future, which came to as a result of internal contradictions of capitalism. We want to present you also two journals where we want to publish results of this discussion. And thank you so much extremely for this very important event. I'm sorry, I cannot read the text and I was very nervous. That's why my English was not fine. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. That was fantastic. I can say that I'm a historian, not an economist, but I understood every word of that. And with 1 million workers on strike in Britain today, this is a very, very good, it's very important that we understand exactly what the enemy is. And so now we are going to go to our discussants. And we've got 3 of them who will make I'm sure, a very, very useful contribution to this. And I think I must ask Professor Radhika Desai, who's obviously very influential in this thing, to speak first. Radhika Desai teaches politics at the University of Manitoba, Canada, and she's the author of Geopolitical Economy after US hegemony, and after US hegemony and globalization and empire, published by Pluto, actually, Pluto Press. So Radhika, the floor is yours now. You're muted, Radhika. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mary. And it's a great honor not only to be here to talk about this book, which I will in a second, but also to be here under the auspices of the Marx Memorial Library. We're just providing the technical stuff, but you are the hosts, absolutely. So since we are pressed for time, let me just dive right into it and say that I commend to everyone here Capital in the 21st Century, not just as the work of two outstanding Marxist scholars who have long worked in tandem. I also commend to you its provenance. It emerges, as Sasha said, from a tradition of scholarship, the post-Soviet school of critical Marxism, which embodies what we may see as the best of Eastern or Soviet Marxism, which I think in critical ways, certainly if this book is anything to go by, has cleaved a lot closer to Marx and Engels' original understanding than the bulk of what passes for Western Marxism. Because that tradition, as I have argued in a series of writings, has lost touch with Marx's analysis of capitalism as contradictory value production. By pursuing what Nikolai Bukharin called a policy of theoretical reconciliation with neoclassical economics, more or less as soon as it emerged in the 1870s. The result has been a Schumpeterian lionization of capitalism as a Promethean system capable of ceaselessly developing the forces of production, suffering few if any contradictions, and basically unlikely to be overthrown, certainly of its own contradictions. This conception of capitalism involves the scandalous and entirely unwarranted dismissal of Marx's analysis of capitalism on the grounds that it suffers from a transformation problem. And the spurious claims that Marx was wrong about the tendency of the rate of profit to fall and did not say that it suffered from demand deficits. This is just mind-boggling to anybody who's actually read Marx. I've written a long series of articles discussing this, and I won't go into that. And I also emphasize this in my new book, Capitalism, Coronavirus, and War. Capital in the 21st century is refreshingly different. For Buzgalin and Kolganov, contradiction is real. Capitalism is contradictory. It needs to be studied not through some Marxist economics, which is a kind of an oxymoron anyway, because Marx and Engels engaged in a critical study of political economy and did not think there was a separate economy to be studied in separation from society. So staying close to Marx's original interpretation was clearly possible in the Soviet Union, and thanks to the post-Soviet school of critical Marxism also after it. For Buzgalin and Kolganov, as for Marx and Engels, what is at stake is the future of humanity, both in the sense of people and in the sense of what it is to be human. It is the sense that we find in Adam Smith's criticisms of capitalism for its corruption of what he called moral sentiments. And this critique of capitalism, which is also, of course, much more highly developed in Marx. This critique of capitalism is about this sense, not about my equations are bigger than yours sort of competition in much of what passes for Marxist economics today. And this philosophical sense is very much preserved, and I find that it pervades this work. I won't go too much into the details of what's in it because Sasha has already done a good job of it, but I did want to say a couple of things. First is the methodology, and it involves, in their words, the ascent from the abstract to the concrete, the application of the historical genetic approach owing to much to Hegel and the dialectical method. This permits them, I feel, to define the nature of late capitalism in a unique way as the contradiction through which market and capital themselves negate and undermine their own foundations. How like Marx this is. Let me just quote a very brief section from chapter 27 of volume 3, describing the implications of capitalism's arrival at the monopoly stage. Marx says individual capital now receives the form of social capital, capital of directly associated individuals, in contrast to private capital. And its enterprises appear as social enterprises as opposed to private ones. This is the abolition of capital and private property within the confines of the capitalist mode of production. And of course, in line with this, we have an original definition of capitalism as monopoly capitalism, and moreover, as the undermining of the power of money. Sorry, as moreover, the form that it takes after overcoming the undermining of the power of money, which was often called financial suppression in the post-Cold War period under neoliberalism, which has brought the regression of finance into usury and predation and a reliance on rent, etc., rather than profit. So this I also found very interesting, and also I would like to underline that Buzgalin and Kolganov apply very, very well the non-linear, the idea that capitalism's development is non-linear, that it can in fact regress as well. Thirdly, I found fascinating the transformation of the commodity itself through the acquisition of new qualities. Acquisition of new qualities by value, use value, and prices. This happens through the tendency towards the totalitarian control of the market, with enormous control and regulation exercised not by states but by large corporations, and which tends to pervade all spheres of human life, producing not merely goods, producing not so much goods but brands, and multiplying the falsehood of the forms generated. I think this kind of very human critique is very necessary, and you don't see it a lot. Obviously, the discussion of finance capitalism and the new nature of money based on fictitious financial capital manipulated by states and large corporations, creating what I felt was a very pregnant formulation, the illusion of profit rather than profit itself. And finally, we have a new form of capital itself, one that, to be sure, is extracting surplus value in the classical form from a larger industrial and wage-earning proletariat than ever before, but also features creative work centrally. And Buzgalin and Kolganov argue that the exploitation of the creative worker involves not just the appropriation of surplus value that he or she creates, but also the exploitation of a certain amount of the universal creative effort of humankind, of universal cultural wealth. This result, associated as a rule not with a creative worker but with a subject of intellectual property, has no value, but it has a certain price, once again adding to the transformations of capitalism. And the general discussion of the creatosphere and the social creativity of the working class is also fascinating. And the result of all this, I find, is a very interesting contradiction between, on the one hand, increasingly vigorous growth of creative activity, and on the other hand, the formation and non-linear growth of the useless or false sector, by the way, a growth in which this creative activity is very heavily implicated. So these are the main elements, and what would I like to say about them? Just a few things. First, I would like to say that I would like to emphasize what I call the post-Soviet critical Marxist naivete, where I use the word naivete in the best sense of the term, as the ability to be shocked by the inhuman and a refusal to be cynical. It is also the ability to call capitalism's degeneracy when most Western Marxists are still lionizing in a Schumpeterian way as capable of endless productive development, and even seeing financialization as representing a form of regeneration and resurgence of capital, which of course is the opposite of the reality. As opposed to this, Buzgalin and Kolganov unapologetically reinstate Marx's original conception of capitalism's historical evolution, and account for its persistence even after reaching its highest stage through the methodological innovation of non-linearity. That is, why is it that capitalism is still persisting even after reaching this higher stage? It's persisting in extremely perverse forms. That's what one of the messages of the book is. Secondly, they comprehend the unproductive financialization as a regression. And I would like to add here that I'm particularly attracted to this argument because it's very close to an argument I've been making in my geopolitical economy, as well as in capitalism, coronavirus, and war. And an argument that I've developed more recently with Michael Hudson in our paper, Beyond the Dollar Creditocracy. And which, by the way, we are also talking about a lot in the new geopolitical economy hour that Michael and I have launched. Thirdly, they criticize unabashedly and fully and frontally the tendency of capitalism to create the simulacras of use values and the false needs and the false products that they create. And finally, I love the discussion of the exploitation of culture, knowledge, and creativity, which are the legacy of the whole of humankind, as I think Buzgalin and Kolganov see so clearly, which is actually the same way in which capitalism exploits nature, which is also the legacy of the whole of humankind. So in a certain sense, what capitalism is doing is exploiting both nature and second nature, which is often a word used for culture, both of which are raided to keep this degenerate form of capitalism going. And finally, I feel that Buzgalin and Kolganov are able to see what late capitalism has become 5 decades since Mandel coined this term, and over 3 decades since Jameson sought to base his theory of the postmodern on it. And they're able to clearly identify what it is, which is a system of rent-seeking. But I also had a few quibbles to register, but since we are short of time, I think I'm going to just end on a high note by saying the following, which is this is a marvelous achievement, I think, of Buzgalin and Kolganov, and they have provided us in the space of fewer than 250 pages, the fruits of a lifetime of work on the undeservedly neglected Eastern periphery, these are their words, of Marxist scholarship. So let me close by saying that when, as a young scholar, I first became acquainted with Marxism, as presented by Western Marxism, since I encountered it in the West on the whole, I could not help sensing a whiff of disdain for Eastern Marxism, which was allegedly incapable of intellectual innovation or originality, or even of fidelity to Marx and Engels. I think if this book does nothing else, it will redeem the reputation of Soviet and post-Soviet Marxism. Of course, in reality, it is already doing a lot more. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And our next speaker is going to be Professor David Kotz, because he's got to leave, I think, quite soon. David Kotz is from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and he's the author of The Rise and Fall of Neoliberal Capitalism. David, it's your turn now.
I'm very glad to be a participant in this event. Buzgalin and Kolganov's book, Global Capital, should be of interest to everyone who wishes to understand contemporary capitalism. While drawing on the work of many other scholars around the world, Buzgalin and Kolganov offer a unique and provocative analysis that renews Marxist political economy by stressing its dialectical roots. The book analyzes the transformation of market relations, the spread of capital's power to new aspects of social life, including free time, and the remarkable expansion of fictitious capital in this era. I think it is notable that they distinguish between the stage of finance capital that emerged around the turn of the 20th century and financialization, the form of capitalism that we observe recently. One of their key points is a focus on the relation between capitalist profit-making activity on the one hand and non-capitalist, non-market forms that exist alongside it. The capitalist mode of production is inherently incomplete in that it cannot be the only form in a society. And one can see this most clearly in the basic process of exploitation of labor, which requires the reproduction of the working class. The reproduction of the working class cannot be carried out within capitalist profit-making institutions. If it were, then workers would have to be, after they're produced, would have to be the property of those institutions and be sold or rented, and it would not be a system of free labor. Capitalism requires families or households to reproduce the working class, with a role also played by schools, another institution that must operate by principles other than the pursuit of profit. You can see the difference in certain cartoons. One time during a business cycle recession, I saw a cartoon that showed a family sitting around the table with the head of the family saying, what with rising prices and increasing economic pressure, I'm going to have to let some of you go. Well, that doesn't happen normally. Families operate based on different principles. So must schools. A school that operated on capitalist principles would, sell diplomas. They do exist around the fringes. And states in their internal relations must be different from the pursuit of profit. It's called corruption when it happens in a state, but it really means the intrusion of capitalist principles into the state. And what we're seeing in the neoliberal era, here's the key point, is capitalism itself attacking the key institutions that operate based on different principles on which capitalism's own reproduction depends, as market principles intrude inside, in particular, schools and states. For families, it's a little different. Families are being undermined by the ever-increasing hunger of capital for wage labor. Now, I guess the final point I'd like to make is that I agree with Buzgalin and Kolganov's arguments about this being near the end of an era. This is the end of an era. In my book, The Rise and Fall of Neoliberal Capitalism, I argue that the neoliberal form, which emerged around 1980, had a period of relative stability in which it was serving the needs of capital and producing relatively long economic expansions, fostering the rapid growth of wealth on the part of members of the capitalist class. But like every form of capitalism, it eventually is undermined by its own contradictions. And that turning point occurred, in my view, in 2008 with the big financial crisis and Great Recession. The financial crisis itself passed, the Great Recession led to a recovery, but a structural crisis of the neoliberal form of capitalism remains and is producing what we're seeing today, an increasing challenge to conventional politics all around the capitalist world, both to the right and to the left. And like every crisis, while it has great dangers, the possibility of a turn toward neo-fascism in the capitalist world, there is also a possibility renewed of a turn to the left with a period either of a significant progressive reform or even transitions to socialism. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Our final discussant, before we move on to other contributions, is Professor David Lane. David is the emeritus professor at Emmanuel College, Cambridge, and was previously Professor of Sociology at the University of Birmingham. So, David Lane, where are you?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, well, thank you very much. And thanks to the Marx Memorial Library for hosting this session, and thanks to the two authors for writing the book and for Radhika actually arranging the publication. I think the two authors predicate the narrative on a non-linear history of the 20th century, which is characterized by what they call progress and regress, revolution and dead ends. They address what the new forces of production and relations of production, which are unique to what they call late capitalism of the 21st century. Following classical Marxists, they assume that contradictions found here will be resolved by the formation of a new mode of production. The traditional Marxist argument is that contradictions in the economic system of capitalism derived from exploitation in the process of production lead to class contradictions in the social system, which are resolved through revolution, leading to a higher level of productive forces and a classless social order. The emphasis in the book is on changes in the economic system. Late capitalism is an advanced stage of globalized neoliberal imperialism, which has a totalitarian character, according to them. But it is at its sunset, that is, it's on the way down. And they update Lenin's idea that capitalism is moribund. Their argument is that it can only reproduce itself by including elements which provide an irreconcilable contradiction, which is leading to capitalism's decay and consequently to a final state. So what I will do in my talk is to briefly focus on just one element in the book, which I think is a major explanatory theme of the book. And this is a section on the reproduction of capitalism, what they call the sunset of capitalism. A necessary condition for the rise of the bourgeois capitalism was the formation of a capitalist class which arose out of the feudal order. Under late capitalism, they identify an ascendant class which constitutes a contradictory class interest to the dominant capitalist class. Modern capitalism moves to a post-industrial stage in which knowledge becomes a major factor in the production process. And knowledge is created by a faction of the working class. So here Buzgalin develops the idea of the creatariat and an economic area constituted by the creatosphere. Capitalism requires the subordination of the creatariat for it to function and to reproduce itself. Moreover, intellectual rent is extracted by the modern corporation from the creatariat. That's more than just wages, more than just surplus product, but far greater sums, which result from their knowledge, production of knowledge. And here I quote, "The transformation of the conditions of creative activity and of its space and time into a function of capitalism, and thus of creative workers themselves into objects of the exploitation, constitutes the most profound basis for the antagonism between the global capitalist and the creative human being." So late capitalism ensures, and here I quote, "the subordination of the personal qualities of a creative employee and of solidarity relations to the overall process of the reproduction of capital." So here they point to, again I quote, "the new world of creative work and the knowledge-based society, which gives rise to antagonism between market and creativity." Buzgalin here identifies a potential ascendant class arising from the development of productive forces, creating surplus value and concurrently becoming a necessary component for the reproduction of the system. So clearly this social stratum could provide the intellectual and social gravitas for the rise of a higher mode of production. Intellectual property, the authors argue, is a social good which should be part of universal social wealth and not an intellectual product turned into private property commanding an intellectual rent. And on that I agree. But I think this insight needs further attention and development. The question is whether this objective systemic contradiction leads to a social contradiction, that is to say, a class contradiction, the resolution of which would lead to a higher and socialist mode of production. In their discussion, moreover, they note a duality in the class position of proletariat. And here I quote, "Such people are creators, learning for freedom in their vital capacity, while on the other hand, they are owners of human capital, sellers of creative potential with an interest in getting a good price for their commodities." That's their knowledge. Subjectively, therefore, the creator may be both an opponent of the hegemony of capital and concurrently a supporter of its retention. So this suggests then that the proletariat, or at least part of it, can be assimilated into the dominant classes. Its political inclination is to join them, not to beat them. So the implication here is that late capitalism is not the sunset of capitalism, but could be a new and higher phase of capitalism. Maybe the sunrise of a higher level of corporate globalization. So the authors make a number of distinctions between different strata of the proletariat, which takes account of these divisions. They define what they call a perverse sector of useless work, the simulacrum, that is, an economy of fakes. This includes areas such as finance, corporate management, and also the media, mass culture, and professional sport, in which the proletariat receives high economic rewards. And I agree with them, often too high. But these more privileged members of the proletariat are in developed countries. But there are also members of the proletariat in the useful sectors. And these include teachers in state schools, social workers, what they call the rank and file of performance of authentic creatosphere activity. So here we have not a single proletariat, but a highly stratified middle class. The higher class is receiving a significant part of their intellectual rent, which inclines them to join corporate capitalism, and others with high levels of exploitation, an inadequate part of intellectual rent, and opposition to capital. So it is here, I think, that I would pose a number of questions to the authors in the form of comments. First, the proletariat is defined in a very general way, and its boundaries are not at all clear. Just what is creative work? In some places, you include craft shoemakers and social workers. Rural school teachers are included with Nobel Prize winners. These groups do not share very much in common. Many sectors, such as information technology, include workers who not only do creative jobs, but also very routine jobs. You also distinguish between the sectors in which they are employed, the public sector, the private sector, and also self-employment. These are very important distinctions, and you correctly distinguish between their economic interests and the different degrees to which they can be embodied in the corporate sector. You contend, however, that the exploitation of surplus value of creative labor has a political resonance and will gain from a future process of social liberalization. My point is that really creative intelligentsia is relatively small and generally privileged. The academic proletariat is now largely embedded in corporate capital. Secondly, a few of these, people like Russell Brand, and all of you attending this lecture may present a critical faction of the proletariat, a potential ascendant class, I believe, but by far most of its members are happy to identify with the corporate elites under whom they too benefit. You can concede that they consume some of their own intellectual rent. So the question I would pose is, under what condition would they form part of an ascendant class? The growth of a new working class is associated with a considerable decline in support and leadership of socialist parties in Europe. I won't give you any more information on that. Third, you make a distinction between the useful sector and the growth of a useless or perverse sector, which is characteristic of late capitalism. The problem, as I see it, is that many of the activities, such as the media, mass culture, professional sport, which you recognize as useless, are not considered as such by people living in late capitalism. The problem here is that needs are socially generated, and it is quite elitist to define boundaries in terms of one's own preferences. People's needs now are quite different from what they were under industrial capitalism. Some people have a need for their own transport, for entertainment, others for foreign holidays, others for non-vocational education. There is a need for mobile phones, gaming machines, iPads. Moreover, the criterion is disproportionately distributed in the fields which are concerned with these products, such as TV production, theatre, films, mass sport, research, and much research into what you would call perverse products. But you can't and should not exclude them, the criterion, just because you believe that their work is useless. One has to grapple, I think, with what constitutes needs in a post-industrial society. Finally, I think the book is a very stimulating read and significant insights into modern capitalism and novel ways of moving to the sunrise of socialism, I hope. It's important in seeking the transformation of capitalism in the economic and social forces within capital itself. And the authors, I think, do identify possible drivers of an ascendant class.
Well, I'm quite sure that the authors will want to respond to some of those points, but first of all, we are going to, or I'm going to invite some people who've already indicated, or have been indicated to me at any rate, that they want to make a contribution. So, the people I'm going to call out, please try to confine your comments to about 3 to 5 minutes, otherwise we won't get through this. And I do want to allow Alexander and Andrei a right of reply, if you want to put it that way. So the first person I'm going to call is Savas Matsas. Savas, are you here?
Yes, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I will make just a very...
Not very clear, actually, Savas. Speak more into your microphone. Yeah.
Okay, now?
Yeah,
no?
yeah.
No. Now?
It's okay. Yeah, carry on.
Okay. I will be very brief. First, I want to make 3 points for this very...
We can't hear you very well.
Let me go to somebody else. I'll come back to you, Savas.
Yes, okay.
Maybe you can, yeah. Okay, so now I'll call Mikhail Pavlov. Mikhail Pavlov, are you here? No?
I am not here that he is participating. I'm sorry. Maybe
all right.
some
Okay, let me go to the next one then, Alexander, please. Dmitry Melnikov.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I would like to thank for invitation. And I would like to say that the main idea as my vision for Professor Buzgalin and Professor Kolganov is a new approach for the method of the ascent from abstract to concrete. And first of all, it concerns the new form exploitation of creative labor by global capital. Because in modern capitalism, this exploitation is much more stronger than typical physical exploitation. which was in classical capitalism
Very.
during Marx. Thank you very much. Have you heard me?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to call Alan Freeman now. Alan?
Can you hear me all, folks?
Yes, yes, that's fine.
Okay, well, I thought this was a wonderful launch. And as Alexander knows, we've been exchanging ideas about the creator sphere for some time now, including an article that I published in Science and Society. And so I want to summarize what I think is the real issue about the creator sphere in an extremely simple way, which is does creative labor produce commodities? It's very straightforward. If I play in an orchestra, I am producing something which is sold commercially. People buy tickets and they go. If I produce a film, that film is sold and I am rewarded for my labor. So it seems to me it meets every criterion of being a productive, value-creating activity, as long as it is paid. It's very straightforward. A commodity is something that engages labor and is paid for. It may be inadvisable to pay the person to do it, but that's what it is. Now, the second problem, therefore, is very simple, that under capitalism, the wage is the principal means by which people who produce value are rewarded for their labor. So that if you don't pay the people who produce creative products, how are they going to create? If they don't get a wage, what are they going to do? Now, this is actually a very substantial problem, and other speakers have commented on it. But according to the empirical work, which we did at the Greater London Authority and with the UK Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and also in Canada and the US, the creative workforce, and we have a very rigorous definition, which is, we've discussed, is about between 10 and 15% of the workforce. And it's growing very fast because mental labor is replacing the labor of production of material objects. To that, you must add scientific labor, which is another 10 or 15%. So you're talking about a quarter of the workforce. If you don't pay them a wage, how are you going to pay them? Now, obviously, we know that the answer to that is socialism, in which people are rewarded by a means other than the wage. But it doesn't strike me that this is something unique to creative labor. There are many forms of labor which one would wish the results to be distributed universally and free. An example is health service, an example is transport. So isn't the creative labor just one instance of the general case that we wish to remove commodity production as a means of distributing the results of labor to the general population? What's different about creative labor, and how will you pay the creators?
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, can I turn to Olga Barashkova? Is Olga here?
Dear colleagues, may I tell a few words in 5-7 minutes? Sorry, I have some problems with the microphone.
Sorry? Are you?
She wants to speak in 5 minutes, not now, because she has technical problems. I'm sorry.
Okay, fine. Okay, yeah, I get it. Okay, fine. So can we go back to Savas? Is Savas got better microphone now? Savas, do you want to try again?
I don't know. Can you hear me or not?
Yes.
Problem? It's okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I apologize for the problem. And also I want to congratulate the authors and the publishers and the Radhika, especially, for this very thought-provoking book, which comes in our very dramatic times. I want just to make 3 very brief points because of the time. I hope in another occasion I will write something. So first, this dialectical investigation of 21st century capitalism is creatively develops Marx capital discoveries in a totally new situation, and I want to stress the topicality, the actuality of the book. It comes in the English-speaking public and readership in a moment where the dominant mainstream neoclassical bourgeois economics is in shambles. It cannot explain, comprehend what is going on in the world of global crisis in which we live today, where even the survival of the humankind is threatened by a warmongering capitalism. So just to remember that in the recent Davos Jamboree, everybody was working there, just speaking, using this word polycrisis, to look profound, but without understanding nothing about what is going on with this world. And they said that. Even the deputy director of IMF, I have to quote, Gita Gobinath, she said that the economic theory that she learned at the university. Yes. Yes, Yuri is you, right? Okay. Sure. But there is a problem there. I will try to make short. So the deputy director, managing director of IMF, had admitted that the economic theory that she was taught does not work in the real world. So in the contemporary labyrinth in which we are, Marx capital and each creative development as that which is proposed by the authors can give us a red Ariadne's file to go out from this labyrinth. Second point I want to make, that this book is a blow against the Western mainstream arrogance, against stressing that there is nothing new coming from the Eastern Front, which means from the former Soviet Union or the post-Soviet space, the demonized Russia of today. On the contrary, we see that the legacy both of critical Soviet Marxism and post-Soviet Marxism has a lot to contribute today to comprehend today's problems, a fight for a real emancipatory solution. And the third point I want to make is the following. I found it very interesting, the contribution and the insights of the book about the nature of our epoch, that they call it the sunset late capitalism, and which to use the classical definition by Lenin of Trotsky, it is the imperialist epoch of capitalist decline, of the decay of this mode of production and of transition towards beyond its limits. So the point made by the authors about the transformations during this epoch from the realm of necessity to the realm of freedom, I found the most thought-provoking and insightful part of this book that we have to discuss in another occasion more thoroughly, because precisely this expresses both the decline of the system, its sunset or the twilight capitalism of today, the most dangerous.
Sanders, I'm going to have to interrupt you because
yes, and I finish. And so this is the point I wanted just to make. I hope that we'll have more opportunity to discuss more and more by reading
Thank you. Is Olga able to speak now? Olga, is your...
Yes, colleagues.
Yes.
Yes, colleagues. Thank you for the time. I would like to thank the Marxist Memorial Library for organizing this presentation, and I'm glad to be able to say a few words about the book. I belong to the younger generation of the post-Soviet school of critical Marxism, and for me, as a representative of the new generation of scientists, this book is especially significant. First of all, this book serves as an inspiring and stimulating example of the author's approach to critically developing the theory and methodology of Marxism, as required by the challenges of the time, as required by the understanding of the current stage in the development of social relations. And the emphasis of the authors of the book on the application of the dialectical method, on the implementation of the historical approach for understanding modern late capitalism, for identifying its capabilities and limits, serves us as an important guide for researchers in how to develop their own research method and how to implement this method in the study of topical problems. Also important in the contribution of the authors to the critical development of the developments of Soviet creative Marxism or Soviet critical Marxism, thus making this heritage in its transformed form, in its developed form in relation to modern problems, more accessible for new generations of Marxist researchers. I would like to emphasize the contribution of the authors to the development of the methodology because I think that it's one of the important point for the new generations of the Marxist researchers. Next, I will be very briefly name a few problems connected with the analysis of the contradictions of late capitalism and with the study of new phenomena characteristics of our era. Of course, it would be very short, but some important theses from the book. This is just as my opinion, my view as a representative of the younger generation of the post-Soviet school of critical Marxism, based on what I see in the development of my colleagues and in our research dialogues. So I would like to emphasize the contribution of the authors to the development of the methodology and in the analysis of the contradictions of late capitalism. And also, I would like to point such problems as new characteristics of market, of money, new forms of relationships between productive forces and production relations, or the new new role of such parts of productive forces as creative labor and its contradictions with the manipulative total market, and so on. And I think that such the contribution of the authors of the book, it's their holistic view that includes and methodology and improving this methodology to analyzing the modern contradictions of late capitalism is very important for Marxist researchers for development their dialogue and for new searches of new ways to solve these contradictions. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Now, I'm assuming that we can go on beyond 8 o'clock. I want to see an indication that we can, because if so, yes, Radhika is nodding. Okay, then I will call some other speakers that have already indicated. And so the next person I'd like to call is David Epstein, who's from St. Petersburg Federal Research Center. Yes, David, are you? I think I saw you. Yes, you're here. Okay, David, over to you. Unmute. You could unmute yourself if you want to speak. Yeah, we can't hear you though. David, we can't hear you. Try again. Oh, go on. Try, David. I'll come back to you, David.
Алло.
Yes.
Давид Беркович, надо перевести на английский язык канал.
Понятно.
I'm sorry, I just said that it's necessary to turn to the English channel because he was speaking in Russian channel.
Oh, I see. Okay. Do you want me to come back to you? I'll come back to you.
Yeah,
right.
продолжайте. Yes, please go on. I'm sorry, Mary. He now can speak,
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Спасибо. Я работаю в Санкт-Петербургском научном центре
No,
Российской
you're
академии.
speaking. Are you speaking English for us?
Now I will speak in Russian.
Well.
Okay,
Я буду говорить.
Давид Беркович,
please choose the Russian channel and then speak in it, and we will have a translation into English.
All right.
Yeah. No, I think Katerina will be able to translate into English. Okay, take a rest. Yeah.
Я могу продолжать?
да, на русском канале продолжайте, Давид Беркович. I'm sorry, Mary, I'm sorry, it's back translation problems,
Okay.
channels problems.
I'm going to go on to somebody else.
Я отношу себя тоже к школе критического марксизма. И у нас в Петербурге, я полагаю, что найдется еще несколько человек, которые или относят себя к школе критического марксизма, или с большим вниманием следят за ней.
David, you will have to choose the Russian channel, because right now I think you are speaking on the English channel.
Давид Беркович, давайте вы чуть позже, я вам сейчас позвоню, объясню все. I'll explain him by phone, so please, Mary. Давид Беркович, подождите, вы будете чуть позже. Давид Беркович.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to call somebody else whilst this gets out.
Yes, Mary, yes.
Okay, so can I now call on Sergei Novikov from the candidate of historical sciences? Is Sergei Novikov here? Sergei?
I'm sorry, I think he is not here. He asked me 2 times to participate, but...
All right. And I'm going to try once more Dmitry Melnikov.
Well, I speak.
Oh, sorry, Dmitry. Sorry.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
No, don't speak again. It's fine. It's fine.
Have you heard me in English? Excuse me. Have you heard me?
Yes, it was very good. Yeah.
Don't speak again, please. Mikhail Pavlov is not here. No. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to anybody who wants to make a contribution. Please raise your yellow hand if you do. If you don't, I won't be able to see you. Let me just see if I can see everybody. Yes, Anna. Oh, it's nice to have another woman. Anna Kostakova then. Yes, you're muted, Anna. Okay, yes. Good.
Thank you so much for this opportunity and for this wonderful meeting. I'd like to say just a few words on behalf of philosophical faculty of philosophy of Lomonosov Moscow State, because it's not accidentally that the Center of Marxist Research is on our faculty, because of course philosopher from the beginning till now, try to summarize of knowledge, first of all, of knowledge about society. And of course, we have a great problem with all Marxisms that we have during the Soviet time, because in the post-Soviet period, we lost some schools, of course, some personality, just like, for example, Bogaturia, who made some text by classical Marxism. He was working also at our faculty. And I listened to his special course on classical Marxism, for example, or a new school of that make a great deal with some foreign colleagues focused on logic of capital by Marx. It's the school of Buzgalin. But all this tradition very different, very flexible, and focused on social aspects and issues of Marxist theory was lost. And unfortunately, we did not use, or rarely used science 19th, this Marxist methodology to understand ourselves. So the book and all the work by Buzgalin and his colleagues, it's a wonderful opportunity to change the situation, and maybe to change it in another option that could do not confront different schools of Marxism, Eastern and Western, but try to use the methodology to react to all transformation that occurs right now. So personally, I am involved in the subject of contemporary philosophy, and it's a great pleasure was to see the first part of the book that not only restores the history of the different Marxist theories, but also try to make the right point with all interpretations of classical Marxism that occur in the second part of 20th century, and then in our century. That's also the postmodern approach and the French theory. And I am sure that we have a lot of subjects to discuss in the future in this matter. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you, dear colleagues, for this book.
Thank you, Anna. I'm going to try David Epstein again. If
Mary, it's a problem with the Russian-English translation, so we will unfortunately postpone the speech of David Epstein.
We'll leave it then, Alexander. I'm going to just see if there's any more who want to raise a question. Michael Lebovitz. You're muted, Michael. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. I find very interesting the idea that in attempting to solve problems, capitalism is in fact creating the conditions for its transcendence. I think that's an interesting argument. I had one question. In the foreword, Alexander and Kolganov spoke of the importance of the subjective factor. And when I think of the subjective factor, I often think immediately of the question of class struggle. So I wonder whether this plays any role in your idea about the development of modern, in the late capitalism.
Oh, good. We'd like to hear a question about class struggle, at least I do. Okay, I'm can't see any more contributions, so I'm going to ask then Alexander and Andrei if they would like to reply. Well, I hope you will, because there's lots of questions being raised. So Alexander, you first then.
Yes, thank you, Mary, and thank you very much. Спасибо, друзья. It was a great pleasure to see, to listen many very important speakers, younger generation. It's really fantastic. I cannot express my feelings, but go to the important questions and problems which you discussed. First of all, I want to say that some key aspects of the book were stressed. Very often readers, discussants even cannot understand what author wanted to say. So here, David Kotz stressed dialectical method and key ideas of classic Marxism moved to the modern epoch. The same was in comments of Olga Barashkova. By the way, I'm very proud and happy, we are very proud and happy that we have new generation, up to 20 younger scholars who defended PhD dissertations and even doctoral dissertations. We have 2 degrees in Russia. Students who continue this research and make very interesting results. Olga made wonderful research about regional contradictions and inequality. Natalia Yakovleva about commercialization of education and alternatives to commercialization of education and social sphere. By the way, David Kotz also mentioned this question. So second question, which Sava stressed, very often we Marxists forget about transformation of realm of necessity to the realm of freedom. This is fundamental problem. This is the basis for understanding of alienation, disalienation, and so on. And thank you, Savas, that you stress this. But main discussion which we had was a discussion about creative labor, and it's not accidents, because creative labor now became creator of wealth, became a very important subject of class struggle. By the way, Michael, I will move to this question a little later. And typical questions of my opponents, including David Lane, partly Alan Freeman, who will pay to creators? Is creative labor, if creative labor creates a commodity, and so on. Key question really is not commodity, is not money as equivalent for creativity, for creative labor. Key question is creative labor has cultural phenomena as product and development of personality as product. And we can distribute for free this product, and we will not lose this product. We will distribute for free train service. Not everybody can come to the train and can use one train, but everybody can use the book of Leo Tolstoy or new academic book of Savas Matsas Mikhail or your article, Alan. It's not limited. It can be for free. Who will pay for this to create a society? And we have experience how it can be done. Public university, public school, public health care. And also to David Lane, who stressed key ideas of the book. David, thank you so much. You made wonderful, fantastic summary of key ideas of our book. I cannot do this, could not do this, but you did it better. And what I want to stress that, of course, it's very difficult to find statistical equivalent to creative sphere, to creative labor, to creative workers. But let's look to the Das Kapital of Karl Marx. Do you find, can you find a lot of statistic in this book? Is it really very important for this book, statistic of the 19th century, mid-19th century? It's a fundamental theory. Then it is a huge problem how to move from abstract categories, from the system of categories to the concrete facts. But this is another question. And we have to do this, but we did not do this enough in the book. So your critic, David Lane, is very important. I'm sorry to say the family name because we have many Davids, so I have to explain. There are a lot of other aspects which we want to discuss and have to discuss, but we don't have time now, unfortunately. Andrei will add something, and finally, if it's possible, I will move again to the to say you a few words about practical results of this event, because we had not only 50 participants of Zoom, but we had a lot of people in website alternatives where we had Russian translation. So we want to make some results, and we want to discuss with you possible results of our meeting.
Okay, Andrei, would you like to add something or reply to any of the points? Andrei, are you here?
Yes, yes, only some words. Alexander touched almost all problems which discussed during this evening. And I can stress only 2 points. First of all, it's the idea of Radhika Desai, which point out the problem of classical Marxist methodology, because it seems to me the classical Marxist methodology serve the significance for the all studies, all researchers in the fields of the Marxist society, and all attempts to rethinking the fundamental features of Marxist methodology, of classical Marxist methodology, it seems to me were unsuccessful during 20th century. So we must understand it. We must use this classical heritage of Marxism. And the second point, it's a problem of the class struggle. I'm not satisfied by our own researchers in this field, because they made some attempts to analyze modern class structure of the capitalism and the consequences of these shifts in the class structure for the practical questions of the class struggle. But it seems to me we don't made a necessary links between our fundamental political economic conclusions and links with shifts in the class structure of the modern capitalism. This is a study which must be made in the future. Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. I think that this meeting will certainly...
Can I add a few words only about possible results
about
of
the
this?
class struggle, yes?
The class struggle, and
Okay,
a few words
yes.
about what we will do after that. So I'm sorry for interruption. But first of all, if you want to have more materials of post-Soviet school of critical Marxism, it was special issue of Critical Sociology Journal, where we published more than 10, I think 12 articles, including articles about modern social structure and contradictions of class struggle. It's in English, available. I think it's one of the late issues of 2022 in paper, and it was published in website in 2021. Also, in the nearest future, will be published a new book by Brill, where not only we with Andrei, but also Lyudmila Bulavka-Buzgalina. I'm very happy that I'm husband of Lyudmila. She wrote a wonderful text about culture and market, about desalienation, topics which we didn't discuss now in this discussion. And finally, about results of the meeting, we are very happy to publish materials in our journal, Questions of Political Economy, Problems in Political Economy, in the journal Alternatives. And if it will be possible and library will give us permission, we are happy to put Russian, to download Russian variant to the website of Alternatives and channel, YouTube channel of Alternatives, which has 12,000 persons who are watching this channel. And the website is also very popular. So if it will be, if it is possible, we are very happy to do this. And everybody who has texts or any comments, please send us. I wrote in the chat email, and we are absolutely happy to publish critical materials, remarks, all elements, all your opinions about the book. And I'm sorry, I'm very worried. Not worry, nervous, I don't know, emotional during this meeting. It's a really important event. Marx Memorial Library made great present, not only for us, but for all Marxists in our country. And thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Mary. And of course, main discussants, Radhika, David Lane, David Kotz. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to have the last word, Alexander, and thank you very much. Thank you for the book. I think it's been a great meeting, and I think we're all inspired to read it. And just, I'm going to abuse my position in relation to the class struggle to say that Marx Memorial Library is not just a library, it is a workers' school, and our aim is to inspire the class struggle with Marxist ideas, and that's what we do in terms of our education in the workers' school. John Foster and myself are both very involved in that. So I think this analysis of capitalism will be very useful. We'll have to distill it in a way which is comprehensible, but I understood it, so I think everybody should be able to. So thank you very, very much indeed. It's been a great meeting. This will be on our Marx Memorial Library website. It will be the recording of this, so it will be seen in this country, and I'm sure it's going to be seen a lot in Russia and in Canada. And thanks so much, Radhika, for enabling us to have this through this new, well, yes, this new creativity, proletariat, which has enabled Zoom, which is actually things that we can use for ourselves to internationalize our ideas and our struggles. So thanks, Manitoba. Thank you very much, Radhika. Please look at the Marx Memorial Library website where you will see a recording of this, but you'll also see some of the work we do. And of course you can join, because most of our stuff is online now, so we can do much more work together. That's if we want to. I want to, but I hope you do too. So thank you very much indeed to everybody. We finished. You see?
Mary, I'm sorry, applause and thanks for interpreter. Yuri Simonov made interpretation.
Yeah, I was going to come to that, Alexander.
Yes, so great job, fantastic
Thank
job.
You, Alexander. I was going to just say that.
Yeah, and Salavat also Islamgulov, who made technical for broadcast of the event for Russian audience, because we have huge Russian audience listening in Russian variant. I'm sorry for interruption, but it was important.
Yes, okay, Alexander, but I was going to say that, but thank you again to the translators, and thank you to everybody for coming. And we finished well, 10 minutes after, 20 minutes before we said we were going to, but 10 minutes after it was scheduled. But so once again, thank you very much. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you and goodbye.